Maybe you like classical music or have heard that it's beneficial to listen to, but you're not quite sure how to connect with it. Well, if that's the case, I have a perfect opportunity. We are going to explore classical music through the lens of fairy tales. Fairy tales are something that we all probably grew up listening to and adore. They speak to us because they have a sense of fun, play, adventure, and they sometimes even could be a bit scary. We are going to enter into Schumann's forest with a work that he composed named Waldszenen, or Forest Pieces. And in this forest, we have 9 different musical stations or pieces that Schumann wrote. And today we're going to explore the first one, which is called The Entrance. I'll never forget when I was about 11 years old. We moved into a new home, and it was our first day living in this new house. And I had always loved to take walks in the woods. It was my favorite place. Under a canopy of trees, I would just sit there with a book or just nothing at all and just daydream and feel nature around me, almost like talking to the flowers. I was that kind of kooky kid. So when we moved into this house, I was so excited because there was an actual forest in the backyard. So the first thing I did when we got to this house was grab my sister, who is 3 years younger than me, and say, hey, do you want to go exploring? So it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We had just gotten home from school. And so we set off. And because I was reading a lot of fairy tales back then, like Hansel and Gretel, I said, let's bring some crackers just in case. Maybe we need to use them as breadcrumbs and so drop them along the trail so we find our way back home. It was our first time ever exploring this new terrain. And so that's what we did. Once in a while, we'd drop a few breadcrumbs of these crackers, and we kept going and going and going and going. And we loved it. Oh my gosh, look at these trees. Oh, look at there. There's like something up there on the hill. It's like gold, some gold dome. And so we were like, what in the world is that? We started going towards it. And by the time we knew it, it started to get dark. And we said it's probably time to get back home. Now you can imagine this is before the times of cell phones and such things. And so we started to return back home, but pretty shortly into our return, we realized we were lost. We didn't know where we were going. And it started to get darker and darker, and we just kept going around in circles. There was no way out. My sister started crying. I started panicking, thinking, oh my gosh, I should have known better than to take such a risk. And those crackers, by the way, didn't work because we couldn't see a trace of any crackers in the ground. So before long, we headed up to that dome. And when we saw that dome, it was like nothing I've ever seen before. It was this magnificent dome, and I actually honestly thought in my child brain that we had crossed to another country. We were on this trip for so long, and it was the gold dome of a Greek Orthodox church. I seriously thought that we were in Russia or something like that. So the panicking got even worse because now it's full-fledged black darkness outside, the moon is coming out, and we were frightened. And we were trying to get out of that forest as soon as we could. And, thankfully for that church, we realized there must be a road somewhere close to the church. And we started going down this road. Eventually, we saw that there were some houses. We did something pretty crazy, but we didn't know what else to do. So we just knocked on a stranger's door. My sister's crying, I'm a mess. And I explained that we're lost and we need help. And they were very nice people. They called the police, who said, okay, where do you live? And I had no idea because I didn't even take the time to even memorize our address. So I had no idea. So thankfully, by that time, my parents were calling the police. And so they had put it together that, probably you guys are the missing kids. And so they drove us home. And I mean, the story ended on a high note. We were reconciled with our parents. We made it home. But that adventure never left me because it gave me a taste of the woods and the forest, both as such an inviting place for adventure, but also quite a haunted place. When it gets dark and you're alone, all those primal fears seem to take over. You start hearing animals. You start wondering if some animal's going to attack you. I don't know. So those were those types of images. But on a deeper level, aside from the forest as a place to go physically, it's also a place for us to visit on a different level, on a more spiritual and also level of self-actualization. So I'd like to present this piece, Waldszenen, as a kind of hero's journey that we will undertake. We're going to visit 9 spots, 9 pieces along this musical journey. And the first step begins with our first piece, which is called Entrance or Threshold. Let's take a listen to it right now. We'll be diving into this piece a little bit further to explore 3 motifs that are found in there that are significant for our longer adventure. But I wanted to mention that a threshold to pass through is the hero's journey. It's a concept that Joseph Conrad popularized, and it's basically the premise for any real great movie or novel, and even as a template for our life, and an invitation to go further and deeper than we ever have. And it's because we can self-actualize. And so music, classical music, what does that have to do with self-actualization? Which to me means to have a dream in your heart and actually take steps towards that dream, not to let it fester. Because I think, especially now that we're still in the beginning of 2026, there are dreams that we have. And every year is a fresh kind of moment that we can think about those dreams too. And what have we deferred? What have we abandoned and why? And also, what still lights us up? And what do we feel we want to go ahead on in this year? So let's talk about this threshold that Schumann invites us to cross. In Joseph Conrad's world of the hero's journey, the threshold is the first step. It's the call to adventure. If we didn't take that call to adventure, we would never experience the thrill of actually making it to the other side. But also, if we stay in our comfort zone, it's also safety, right? Like, we don't have to face those spooky places, or we don't have to get lost in this thicket of forest, and we don't have to actually get dirty and sometimes look at the icky stuff, memories or emotions that we don't want to necessarily look at, but which are such an essential part of the hero's journey. When we get rid of comfort, we receive courage. And we see that this is a biblical concept. For instance, Abraham was told to leave everything that was comfortable without any roadmap, without any guidance, just God saying, go. Simple as that. And he heeded the call, and the rest, well, is history. Another figure from the Bible was David, who was called out of the pasture. Even his father didn't recognize that he could potentially be the prophet that they were looking for. Out of all his sons, he was the least that he would expect. But David was called out of the pasture where he was playing his harp and tending to the sheep, and into the palace of a tormented King Saul, who was depressed, and he seemed to be quite deranged in his mind. And the only thing that helped him was David's harp playing, which is another very important connection between music and how it heals our spirit, our soul, our emotion, and I believe our bodies. I have seen it. So it's a deep thing. It's a philosophical premise that Beethoven popularized when he said that music is the incorporeal entrance into the world of the spirit that knows us, but which we cannot understand. In other words, it is the higher path. It's another dimension. Music, I like to say, is the fourth dimension. And we can't understand it. Perhaps it's on a quantum level, but we can enjoy it. And we can also, beyond just enjoying it, we can use it as a powerful way to connect to heaven and to ourself, and to elevate our consciousness. So we're going to go to the piano now and discover 3 very powerful concepts, little clues that Schumann inserts in this little piece that will serve us for the rest of the journey. Now, let's talk about Schumann. Schumann was born in 1810 in a very small town called Zwickau in Germany. And unlike some of the other great composers who were coincidentally born around the same year, which included Mendelssohn and Frédéric Chopin and Franz Liszt, unlike many of these figures, Franz Liszt was a child prodigy, Mendelssohn a huge child prodigy as well, and Chopin, yes. All 3 were child prodigies, but Robert Schumann was a prodigious genius, but not necessarily only in music. In fact, his parents didn't necessarily want him to go into music. They gave him lessons, but in that little town, there weren't great illustrious teachers, and he did stay in this town until he was 18 years old. As a result, he was largely self-taught, which meant that he had certain skills that were innate because of his genius, but others that needed still to be developed. And that's what sets Robert Schumann apart from the other three composers born around the same time, because they all had access to great teachers. Franz Liszt, his teacher was Carl Czerny, who was a student of Beethoven. And also when we look at Mendelssohn was born into a family of tremendous means, and they loved music. And so they cultivated an incredible musical and cultural upbringing. And as for Chopin, his genius was such that, well, he was pretty much nothing needed to be taught to him. He just understood so much, and he had a great foundation in counterpoint. So when Robert Schumann he could have easily compared himself and said, well, maybe I should stay behind. Maybe I should become a lawyer like my parents want me to. Maybe I should give up on these musical dreams, because to be a pianist composer, which was the door of that era, quite honestly, Schumann didn't have the pianistic skills of his other composer counterparts. And so there was a choice that had to be made, what to do. To take the safe route that his parents wanted, which is to stay in the family business, which was a literary business, or to pursue the music. Now, in order to pursue the music, he would have to step through the threshold, which meant leaving the little town of Zwickau and going to Leipzig, which was the closest musical capital. And so, well, you know what happens next. You could guess. He decided to go to Leipzig. And in Leipzig, he met a man who had a daughter named Clara. And this man's last name was Wacyk. And so he studied with him. He was a great, great piano teacher of the time. And he was able to fill in a lot of the blanks and supplement his piano playing and get better, although it never would be on the level of a virtuoso like Franz Liszt. But nevertheless, he was composing, and he was soaking up all the culture, soaking up all the concerts, soaking up all the inspiration, and he just, had the time of his life in that era. But he had to take a chance on himself. He had to step through that threshold. And we all do. And so when Schumann wrote this piece, he was already later in his life. He lived a short life. He died when he was only about 44 years old, and the circumstances of his death were very tragic. And we'll get more into that and the theme of his life and his inner struggles, his inner torment and conflicts do come up in this Waldszenen. But what shines most of all is his utter poetry and imagination, his childlike whimsy, and yet his depth and profound nature. You will love his harmonies. They seem to be just like cotton candy from the air. He just puts notes together in these marvelous combinations and sweeps us up into this incredible world of poetry and delight and fantasy. So let's go to the piano and let's go a little bit in depth. Schumann takes us into a world of poetry, of meaning, and of depth in these charming pieces called the Waldszenen. And so this is piece number 1, which is the invitation to cross the threshold, and it's called Entrance. And in this piece, which is written in the key of B flat, it's a very peaceful and very calming key, many times associated with the color blue. Incidentally, this key of B flat is featured in most of this set. And in fact, 5 out of the 9 pieces are written in B flat, and in G minor, which is its relative, we have the fourth piece of the set, which is probably the most haunting one. And so that already tells us a lot about meaning and color and what Schumann meant in terms of mood. And so right away, how does Schumann establish this invitation to this journey? Well, it's in such a happy way with this theme. And if you notice, it has this kind of like jumpy kind of feeling. It's like that feeling of, oh, you just cannot sleep at night out of anticipation of the next day, where you have something wonderful planned and you just cannot wait for it. So he expresses that with this. It's kind of like, yeah, like a breathless anticipation. So yet, in this very short piece, only 2 pages long, Schumann also does give us a sense of a little bit the clouds inside this sunny sky. There will be clouds, there will be some dramas, there will be some storms ahead. And I'd like to show you one of those places in a moment. But just first, to get us into that mood of this piece, starting so fresh and so ebullient with this gorgeous melody, which invites us to this forest. Now, the clouds. And that's the second point. It's that he tells us in this opening that, yeah, there'll be some getting lost. And what we hear in this section, we hear something called a diminished chord. And there is something about a diminished chord, which is like when you get lost in the woods. If you heard my story about as a kid getting lost in the woods, there was a moment where I didn't know which direction to turn. Should I turn left? Should I turn right? Should we go north? Should we go south? There were just so many options and I didn't know which one to choose. A diminished chord is this kind of intersection. We can go so many places in a diminished chord. For instance, if I play this diminished chord, I could easily land here. Or I could go here. Wow, that's punchy. Or how about? That seems calm. I could also go a little bit more somber. But as you see, there's so many different resolutions to that. There are so many paths that we could choose. And so here Schumann is saying, that there is ambiguity. The path may turn and twist for me in a different way that it might for you. For all of us, we have choices to make, detours. So this is a musical metaphor for, these detours in life and those moments of intersection that will naturally come when we set on this hero's journey. It won't be easy, and a lot of times we won't know which way to go. But it's also a sign here that no matter where we end up, we'll find our way out. We'll have a guide. It'll be fine. And then here, very foresty. Something called a secret doorway, that secret passageway, with an earlier moment where we went a different direction. And then this second time we had this. That F sharp leads us to a new place. And that is so much a part of Schumann's writing, is he gives us these little secret doorways, I call them, these slight changes, these different moments that seem almost the same, but they take us into almost like a trapdoor to another world. Schumann was big into creating worlds of sound, little orbs of harmonic clouds where we can just escape and relish in them, but yet he so marvelously makes it a part of the whole, the seamless whole. Here is one example of it. When we go a little bit further in this piece, after this moment, here's one of those beautiful moment of dream, and now this is something very new, where the left hand is almost, it's like, ooh, it's rushing forward. It's got something new to say, which we haven't heard anything like this before. And then the right hand responds. Now, here we see another aspect of Schumann's writing, which is a marvelous sense of symmetry. Yes, this music is fantastical. Yes, this music tells a story. Yes, this music is very poetic. But at its core, it is also perfectly constructed with so much discipline and so much knowledge. There, you could really see the craftsmanship in Schumann's writing because of moments such as this, where there is a symmetry, where you see that, okay, what the left hand introduces the right hand, then picks up. There's an economy of material that he doesn't leave scraps that are not developed around. That's the sign of great craftsmanship in music writing. And so we can always find a parallel somewhere else. In fact, we will hear some amazing parallels coming up in different pieces within this set. I'll give you one example. There is an incredible symmetry which happens here. So this is the context. We've just done this left hand motion up, now the right hand. Now this moment. Now this moment will come again. In fact, it happens in a future piece, which is called A Friendly Landscape. And we meet this again in the middle of that piece where it goes. So we do have a little bit of a taste, a foreshadowing in this piece of things yet to come. So, of course, he ends in the swirly cloud after we hear the reprise of the opening. It's almost like a bugle call in the left hand. Like this little swirly. So gorgeous, so fantastic. These pieces were really beloved by Schumann. He many times mentioned in his writings that they're some of his very favorites. And his wife, Clara Schumann, said that she couldn't bear to listen to some moments. And I think it's because they were just so personal and they were so lovely. And so what's yet to come will be an incredible poetic display of so many different flowers and little friendly landscapes we'll see on this journey. We'll also go to a haunted place. We'll meet a prophet bird with much to say, and even a little resting place, a little happy house where we can find comfort. So it's just such a fun piece. It's such an adventure. And yet the whole idea of this series is to make the music real and personal to each of us in this context of a hero's story, where we can put ourselves on the threshold in this piece of a new adventure, of a new life dream, or something that we want to accomplish this year but have put aside. And so that does take courage. That does take taking a new step. And I just hope that you enjoy the way that Schumann is leading the way, paving the way with this beautiful music, sort of seeding our heart and our ears and our nervous system and our spirit in order that we too can undertake an adventurous new step in our life. This painting by Caspar Friedrich called The Wanderer gives a sense of standing at the edge of a new reality, the promise of having achieved the height of heights, of having done that thing, that dream, that fulfillment of a wish, a longing in your heart. In this painting, the wanderer has obviously survived the climb. And perhaps he also had to go through some forests in order to get there. And it's obvious he had to face a lot of struggles and challenges to get up to that mountaintop. But he crossed the threshold. And so as we listen and conclude this week's segment, I have some questions that I invite you to reflect on. And so I'll share a couple of them now, and we'll replay the music. But if you'd like to go deeper, please download the free journal. And I also invite you to join our community. It's a private community where we go in depth. Every 2 weeks, we meet on a Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we sit around the piano, so to speak. There's live music, there's discussion, there's a book group. We are now reading a book called The Sound of Your Blood, which is absolutely amazing. And it fits so perfectly with the theme that we will explore in the fourth piece of Schumann. Music is power. And so I invite you for an hour of power that we enjoy. And so also my piano is tuned to 444, which is a very sacred frequency. And so many people have told me that they have experienced cathartic and healing effects just from listening to this piano and its golden tone. So I invite you to come to our very special private group as well. Let's listen again and let's reflect. As you listen, did you feel invited, hesitant, curious, resistant, or something else entirely as you stand at the threshold? Where in your life do you currently feel like you are standing at the threshold, not yet inside, but no longer outside? What part of you hesitates to enter unfamiliar territory? And that kind of territory of the inner spirit. What are you afraid you might discover if you listen more deeply to music, to silence, to yourself? And lastly, this has to do with letting go of control. This peace does not rush or resolve quickly. When in your life are you being asked to proceed without clarity? What would it mean for you to enter without demanding immediate answers? There are more questions, and again, a guided meditation that is available for you with the download below. On next week's journey, we enter the second step, the second phase of our forest scene. And this one is inviting us to deal with or explore feelings of fear and of challenge, almost of being chased or targeted. It's called Hunters on the Prowl. And it's often the case when we embark on something great that we encounter resistance. And so in the second piece of Schumann's cycle, we experience it with a musical setting. And next week, we will also go deeper into what it means to encounter resistance. How can we tower over it and not let it sink us down, especially when we are in the midst of a challenge or an inner struggle or inner development, because the enemy comes to snatch it all up from us. So we have to stay on guard and stay on top. And how do we do that? With spiritual tools and with the music that guides us through those times of challenge. So I do hope you join for next week's adventure as it continues in the Veiled in Green 9 meta-musical explorations inside the music of Schumann. I hope you've enjoyed this, and stay tuned for more, and please be sure to subscribe and also download your free extra content, the journal and guided meditation. All right, so long for now. Farewell and be well.